What do you do when you're Donald Trump and the Supreme Court rules against you on a case where a federal jury found you liable of defamation and civil sexual assault, and the Supreme Court says we're not going to take up the case on an appeal? Go away. What do you do if you're Donald Trump? Just ask him again. Ask for a mulligan. Ask for a do-over. Supreme Court, I know you ruled against my petition for cert and you're saying you're not going to hear the case, but I don't trust you. I don't believe you. Can I do a do-over? Can I try again? Because meanwhile, the money that Donald Trump owes his sexual assault victim, as adjudicated by a civil jury in a civil federal case, E. Jean Carroll, that money was segregated and put aside. It was a $5 million verdict or so. Donald Trump lost. A unanimous jury, as you all recall, found against Donald Trump in that case. Donald Trump appealed like seven different times when you consider all of these appeals before the Supreme Court recently said, no, go away. And then Donald Trump said, I'm not going to accept. No, I'm not going to. I'm going to petition you for a rehearing. And then I'm going to try to use that petition for rehearing to now demand that the lower courts stay the money being dispersed to E. Jean Carroll on a case she won a long time ago, because I'm claiming that I'm doing a petition for rehearing. And I'm also going to claim that I'm bringing in a lot of new lawyers on the case, and I'm bringing in some hired guns over at the firm of Sullivan and Cromwell and other big time lawyers. And they need to now catch up. And that's going to take them months, maybe years to catch up. So you can't give the money to E. Jean Carroll. And also you can't give her the money because she says she wants to donate the money to charity. Could you imagine? She wants to give my money to charity. That'll be causing me I will be irreparably harmed if the money that was awarded to her because a civil jury found sexual assault and defamation, if she gives that to charity. So to remind you of these rapid developments that have happened recently, you have the Supreme Court ruling against Donald Trump by ruling against rejecting his petition to even hear it. They're like, this is not a case that the Supreme Court takes. Then Donald Trump rushes back to the district court where he's lost and has demanded numerous times that the case be stayed and overturned and all of these things. The federal judge, Judge Kaplan, in a scathing order says, no, go away. In the last analysis, defendant has been stalling this case for years. A jury unanimously concluded he sexually abused and defamed plaintiff and awarded her damages accordingly. The judgment on that verdict has been upheld on appeal. En banc hearing has been denied. The Supreme Court has denied cert without dissent. It is time for him to do equity and pay the judgment. And then the judge in the order before that on page 1 says, more than 3 years ago, a jury returned a verdict against defendant for $5 million for sexual abuse and defamation. The judgment was appealed. Defendant posted a $5.55 million to the court to secure payment of the judgment plus interest pursuant to stipulation and court order. In due course, the judgment was affirmed on appeal. The Court of Appeals denied rehearing en banc, and the Supreme Court on June 29th denied without dissent defendant's petition for a writ of cert. Plaintiff is now moving for disbursement of funds. E. Jean Carroll saying, all right, I won. I want the funds. Judgment plus post-judgment interest. Defendant resisted, contending the payment must or in any event should be stayed against the possibility that the Supreme Court might change its mind, grant his petition for rehearing of cert, and grant certiorari. Losing there, Donald Trump then goes back to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and in a one-sentence order, the Second Circuit denies Trump's emergency motion for an administrative stay of Judge Kaplan's order, which released that money to E. Jean Carroll. And then Donald Trump now is planning a petition for rehearing for the denial there's no hearing. The Supreme Court doesn't want to hear it. It's not a case where they hear on certiorari. They don't want to take this case. But Trump is petitioning them for rehearing. And so Trump is also using this firm called Sullivan and Cromwell. And then there's a whole story there. For those who don't know the inner workings of, big law, as it's called, Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the kind of biggest law firms out there. And it once had, and I say once had because there's a civil war going on over this case, some of the most prestigious reputations, Sullivan and Cromwell, exalted. Think about like a Harvard or Yale of big law firms, the top partners. They started representing Donald Trump in a lot of cases, but the chair of Sullivan and Cromwell told the partners who were very uneasy about this firm leaning in and representing Donald Trump in all these cases, don't worry, we're going to represent him on these cases, more of the businessy cases. We're a business firm, but we will not represent him on any appeals regarding sexual abuse and sexual assault civil cases, any of his other kind of frivolous litigations that he files. You know, there were a lot of women partners, and whether you're women or not women, just partners in general who did not like the way Trump abuses the legal system, not to mention the underlying abuse cases. And so the kind of agreement in this firm was, all right, we'll do just the business cases and that's how we'll justify it. Well, then they leaned in on these cases and now all these other partners are like, what the heck? No, you're sullying the name of Sullivan and Cromwell and the reputation of why we even are at this firm. And so now there's talk, is there going to be a mass exodus out of Sullivan right now? Because people are absolutely pissed that they're now associated with cases like this. And not just the underlying case, which is sick and serious, but now frivolously petitioning the Supreme Court undermines just what Sullivan claims it stands for its clients. I guess nothing anymore. Let's bring in Harry Litman from Talking Fed's YouTube channel, podcast, and Substack. Harry, I know you've got a lot to say on this. I mean, you know these people. You know the Sullivan lawyers. You know you've clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices. I mean, who does that? I mean, Harry's like probably one of 3 people around who is like clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices. So you know that this is the most frivolous of frivolous types of filings. Then to try to parlay that to delay a sexual assault victim from getting the money after winning it. Just break it all down for us, Harry, as you see this.
All right. Well, I got to say, you don't have to clerk for 2 Supreme Court justices to know this is the most frivolous and obstructionist and just, complete ignorant sort of stance on his part. I was a clerk there, and two little points that are pertinent. Right next door to me was a clerk for the then Chief Justice. That's the chair that you just mentioned from Sullivan and Cromwell, who has a revolt on his hands because he said, we're not going to do these offensive or idiotic ones. What happened? Did Trump twist his arm and say you have to, as he's done with so many? I don't know. But yeah, you've properly identified the culture within big law of, man, I'm embarrassed. Every time I talk to somebody or go out, we have to somehow justify this incredible, extended, just complete, disrespectful treatment of a woman who he previously victimized and continues to defame. Get us the hell out of it. That's a really interesting side story. Here's another point that's really important. Now we understand why New York law says you want to appeal this, Donald Trump, you losing defendant, you better give us a bond with interest. And imagine if that wasn't the law, we would be, there's nothing the guy won't do there. He'll what, send all his money abroad or just lie and say, oh, I'm now bankrupt. I mean, we saw these are some of the actual kinds of lies about money that is the reason that he's been convicted of 34 felonies in New York, where all this is arising. He is, but for this bond, yeah, she would be knocking at a door and not getting an answer again and again and again. Third, the courts understood initially this guy's the president of the United States and you get a little bit of slack for that. But everyone knows, what I was saying by the other point about being a clerk, you get all these petitions, including for rehearing. Last time the Supreme Court granted one and reversed, 1965. That's, before the Beatles at Chase Stadium just happened to occur to me. And it doesn't happen. And when he has only that one speed of, over the top, terrible abuse, worst thing ever, it just so brings him into contempt might be a pretty strong term, but any judge hearing that, they then affiliate him with the craziest kinds of pro se litigants who come their way. It just completely undermines his ability to even understand. This is a point where even if you were a never say die kind of person, your lawyer, now maybe his lawyers can't control him, would just say, Donald, maybe you can delay this for another week, but at the cost of completely embarrassing yourself in front of all the federal courts, from the Southern District of New York to the Second Circuit, which, as you said, a one sentence order, to the Supreme Court itself. Anyone could tell you anywhere who's been, has had a cup of coffee at the Supreme Court, there is no way in the world. All you're doing is, maybe you like this, but is being a jerk and stalling her for another week. That money is going to charity anyway. And you look to be an absolute ignoramus about the law and the legal system. And, he surely does. He's just a deadbeat, a skinflint, a, flim-flam man saying anything and everything. And I'll end where, with the point I made. Thank God for New York's law. That means that money is already in hand. I think, by the way, we're at the one final legal point. When you have a petition for cert pending in the very case, that case is considered live. So if E. Jean Carroll goes to Kaplan and says, I want my money, he's got a valid argument as Trump. It doesn't apply, however, to a petition for rehearing for good reason, because those never get granted. So that's the reason that Kaplan could first slap him around and say, you're just stalling, and then order it. And my understanding, even as this is working its way up and down, is in the district of the Southern District of New York, where the money is in some way, it's all over, but the shouting and the day or two that's going on now is not because of his ridiculous petition that the Second Circuit has just denied. My understanding is, for whatever reason, and we've all been used to dealing with clerks and courts and the like, it just takes a day or two to print the check or get somebody to sign or countersign, whatever. So, the wheels of justice grind slowly, but they grind exceeding fine. She's going to get her money, and soon, and he's going to look like an idiot, and already does.
Well, and then you've got the 83.3, which
that's all. Can I jump in there? Yeah, because his latest thing is to try to say he's still got a petition for cert in that case, and that's why he's trying to stall for the $5 million, but that doesn't work. But that one's going to be really interesting. Let me send it back to you, Ben. I don't want to monopolize the airwaves here, but just to say, if the court, there's actually an issue he's trying to propound there, and that's what he's saying in this case now. Oh, this important issue that I'm propounding there, that's the reason you should do the petition for rehearing. It's not a reason, but if this Supreme Court takes that issue, which among other things he's already is procedurally barred, he's already waived and the like, that would be a solid to him that would be really revolting.
We will see, and I could pretty much predict he's gonna be paying close to 110, when you factor in interest, $110 million, to E. Jean Carroll. That's my opinion. It's my prediction. Everybody subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel. It's called Talking Feds. Subscribe there now. Tell Harry in some of his videos, leave a comment, say Ben sent you. Ben says hi. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, all you Meidas mighty.
New Meidas merch. Head to store.meidastouch.com today and get yourself the best pro-democracy gear and show your support. That's store.meidastouch.com.